So what that means is that you can very easily extract from any kind of weird model you're running. Any kind of model has something from the summary that it returns that is a pretty standard, like coefficient test type window. And so, for example, with the linear model, you can access it with summary coefficients, and it's just a matrix, it's literally a matrix, and then you can call xtable directly on that matrix, and it'll output the exact same thing you see below. And this is obviously very terrible, and you would not want to print something like this or publish something with a table that looked like this, but you can pretty it up from there because it's then basically in LaTeX format, and you don't have to like go through putting in ampersands all over the place. Okay, I'm going to talk very briefly about plotting, and then I think that the sort of tying it all together, I'm just going to sort of leave alone. So plotting is basically, you can do basically everything in terms of coordinate pairs. So it's very easy, basically just plot x, y. If you want to plot a single point, you could just do plot 1, 2, and we plot point at 1, 2. But then of course, if you have vectors, it'll plot lots of points at once. So then some of the sort of notable options are type. You can, if you do type equals P in quotation marks, it'll do points. If you do L, it'll do a line, and the line will be in the order of the of the vector. So you have to make sure that it's in a logical order first, or it will look ridiculous. PCH, if you want different sort of shapes of points. In what I have later, you'll see I think I use 20, which is just sort of like a solid black dot. Xlim, just the limits of the X limits of the plot, and it's similar for Y. Xlabel gives you a nice label on the X-axis. Main gives you a nice title. Tons and tons and tons of options. This could be an entire presentation unto itself, and I'm not even getting into some of the great third-party tools for plotting, which is like ggplot2, which you may have heard of. You can Google, it's excellent, although I don't find a whole lot of use for it. Yeah, so huge number of options, but some objects, plot is also one of these special functions, so some objects will sort of have their own plotting utility, and so if you plot the linear model object, it'll give you some random diagnostics. And so here's sort of a thing tying it all together, which I create a function for local linear regression. Very easy, just using matrix algebra. So you can look through this, and if you have any questions, as I said, I'll be holding office hours. And then finally, I plot it out. So using the same data that I generated earlier, we can do a nice little local linear fit, and we can plot it all very easily, just like that. So then finally, some just conventions and good habits that you should try and follow while you're coding. First off, as I said, you sort of want to write everything as a script. You don't want to be working too much in the interactive window, except sort of when you have to, sort of when you just like need to explore data or something like that. If you're doing something that you ever want other people to see, you should write a script for it. I mean, it's just a text file that you can save onto your computer. You have plenty of space for it, and you will be glad that you did, because if you do anything kind of weird, you may want to like come back to it and look and see how you did it, and that's not even talking about replication. You want to comment your code. You are not going to remember what it was you were doing when you're looking back at it in 2 months. I know I don't. Nobody does. So commenting your code will help. Make sure your variables mean something. TMP is used all the time in code, and it's terrible. Don't use it. make it something meaningful. As I said before, always be making functions. Whenever you're repeating something, make a function for it. You'll thank yourself. It'll save a lot of time. Be consistent in your style. Make sure that your brackets are sort of in consistent places, just so that it sort of looks smooth and easy to follow. It's just like writing a paper. You want punctuation in sort of consistent places. It doesn't necessarily matter like if you put 1 space or 2 space after a period. Just be consistent about it. Indent your code, but if you're having to indent your code like a lot and go out to like 10 indentations, you're probably doing something wrong, and you should probably write a function. If you're only just barely clever enough to write code, you are not clever enough to fix it when it goes wrong, and it will go wrong. So write simpler rather than more complicated. But on the other hand, fiddle with things. That's how you will ultimately learn how to do things. Then save your work. A good idea is to use like Dropbox, so that if your computer crashes, you didn't lose all of your work. And then the last thing is just break any of these rules when it makes for cleaner and easier to understand code, because that's ultimately the goal. Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you very much. So the slides will be available.
The slides will be available, I think, on the Data Labs website as well as my own.
If you want to relive this evening, the video will be available, and soon it'll be in a major, at a theater near you.
I'm sure.
And Drew's also going to provide a few references.
Yeah, so there are a bunch of things available online for R. There's the Introduction to R, which is a big PDF that you can find online. Then there's also Modern Applied Statistics.
Why don't you just put it on?
We can
add it to the slide.
We can add it to the slides. Yeah, and then also another thing that's very common is Modern Applied Statistics in S, which is like Venables and Ripley, I think. Ripley's still the guy who maintains Crayon. Yeah, he's all over the place. He's kind of grumpy too, I think. But I would be too if I was managing all that. So that's another good resource. I'm sure they have it in BOPST. But there are a lot of good resources for R, or you can just talk to someone who knows.
And most of the R books are Springer, and they're in the library for, you can download them from the library for free.
Yeah.
You can't beat the price of R and R-related stuff.
Yeah, and also Springer Link. You can, if you do just want a book for some reason and you don't want to print it all off, and you don't want to use a PDF, you can buy the books for $25, even if they're very expensive. So you can get them cheap if you don't want to get them free.
The free is better. Yeah. Okay, so thank you. And so 2 weeks we'll be hearing about Python, and then we'll be using these R skills and things. Yeah. So I guess depending on where you are in your R stuff, I would recommend just playing with the LM module, because almost everything is sort of like the formulas are all the same. And
yeah.
All the stuff about what's returned and plotting it and everything. Mm-hmm. So that's my free advice. But,
yes, indeed.
So thank you very much.
All right.
There's more Pete's out there. Maybe if you want it, or invite your friends.